Hey, everybody. Welcome to Adapter Parish, Episode 11, The Fault in Our Stars. This week we read the John Green novel and watched the Josh Boone movie starring Shailene Woodley and Ansel Elgort. Considering that this is the Cancer episode, we tried to keep things pretty light. I think we did a pretty good job. But before we get to the sadness and the tears, let's talk about our next episode. So we thought we'd lighten things up with a little tale of some good old-fashioned family drama, like family with a capital F. The Family, because a podcast that doesn't spend time talking about family can never be a real podcast. Next week, we're talking Mario Puzo's The Godfather. We read the book, we watched the movie, but this time we branched out a little bit. For the first time, Adapter Parish will be taking a step into the world of video games, with EA's Francis Ford Coppola's Mario Puzo's The Godfather, the game. I think that was the official title. I might be a little off on it, but we are very excited for you all to hear it. One last bit of business before we get on with the show. No one can say that Ariel and I aren't committed to our listeners. To prove just how committed we are, I am now 3 episodes in to Aaron Sorkin's The West Wing. So much wit, so many repeated lines, so many walk and talks. I am enjoying it. I am actually really enjoying it. It's pretty fun. So there we are, and updates will be given as needed. And now, on with the show, and John Green's The Fault in Our Stars. Welcome to Adapter Parish. My name is Jeremy Latour.
And I'm Ariel Lipshaw, and this is a podcast about adaptation.
And today we are going to be talking about
the New York Times #1 bestseller by best-selling author John Green, The Fault in Our Stars.
We're doing the Cancer episode.
Yeah.
This is the Cancer podcast today.
It's a cancer book.
Yay.
And a cancer movie about
cancer.
About life in the face of challenges.
What happens when a world in which everyone sounds like John Green experiences, when
cancer.
Everyone in the world experiences cancer?
When 2 extremely articulate, mature, thoughtful, philosophical teenagers experience cancer. Mm-hmm. We'll find out.
Oh my God.
So talk to me a little bit, because this was a book that I suggested. What was which you had not read. What was your experience reading this book?
My experience of reading this book began 5 days ago and concluded yesterday.
Yeah. What was your emotional state?
Well, no, it was a weird one for me because we've seen this. Like, we saw the movie.
Right.
Yeah. So when the movie came out in 2014, and we went to go see it
on my birthday.
On your birthday, we did a double feature. We saw, what did we see first?
Godzilla.
Did we see Godzilla first and then watch The Fault in Our Stars?
I think so.
Okay. All I recall from that day was I recall a number of things that we will talk about. But one thing I do recall is that when all was said and done and we walked out of both movies, I believe, now opinions may have changed since then.
Okay.
However, I do remember at the time that we agreed that the better movie was Godzilla.
No, I think that's true. And I also, the reason that I wanted to do this book was I feel like, so 2014, we had been dating for like 6 months. Mm-hmm. And I feel like going to see this movie of a book that I had really enjoyed and loved, and coming out of the movie going, that wasn't a great movie, I feel disappointed and I don't quite understand why, I feel like really kicked off our initial conversations that we've had throughout our relationship about like what adaptation means. So, which is how we ended up doing this podcast. So I feel like this particular book and movie adaptation are very dear to us as a couple, as far as like the genesis of what would eventually become this podcast.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm sorry.
Sad.
Yeah, it is very sad. I'm sorry. So talk to me about your experience of reading this book, because you don't read a lot of like YA literature. Which
I don't.
Yes.
I don't read a lot of it. Not as a rule. I just don't.
Right.
So my experience was colored by the fact that I had already seen the movie.
Yeah.
So I already knew the story, and from a story perspective, and we'll talk about this. The movie is very faithful. Mm-hmm. It's extremely faithful. So I was reading it. And there's a number of things can I talk for a second about my relationship with John Green?
Yes.
Because my relationship with John Green is different than many people's, and also the same as other people's. Basically, I'm a person.
Yeah.
I've just described being a person.
Cool. That was really insightful.
So when we went to go see it, you said, we're going to see this movie. It's called The Fault in Our Stars. It's about death and cancer, and it's based on this fantastic book by a guy named John Green. And I still remember waiting for you to be ready so we could walk out the door, and the book was sitting there on the coffee table, and I picked it up, and I looked at the back, and his picture was on the back, and I'm like, oh, holy shit, it's the Penny guy. So some people may know what I'm talking about.
John Green apparently is a YouTuber in addition to being a #1 best-selling New York Times author.
That's all I knew him as.
Yeah.
I knew him as a YouTuber. You knew him as an author.
Right.
So what I'm talking about is he's for years now, he's done great YouTube videos, just kind of pretty traditional, like straight into the camera rant videos. That's an oversimplification. He was very well spoken and very well thought out. But he did a great video that I've watched for a really long time about why pennies are stupid and we should get rid of them. Mm-hmm. And I am fully on board with his views on pennies.
Yes.
And I love that video. So when I saw the back of the book, I'm like, oh, it's the Penny guy. And then I think I showed you the video before we left the house.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, this guy wrote the cancer book?
Yeah. And I was like, okay, yeah, great.
And then I go, and so like suddenly within the span of a few hours, I have to kind of reconcile this one dude who I've known doing one thing to, oh, he also is very insightful and understands teenagers and love and is passionate about those kind of things.
Yes.
So that was my experience with him.
Yes. Yes.
And then I read the book. It's
yes,
very
we
good.
still have not gotten to your experience with the book.
It's very good.
Yeah.
I read it. It's very good. It didn't take that long.
Yeah.
Because it's YA.
Yeah.
And it's very, very good. Before I get into kind of my feelings on it, I want to hear what your feelings are.
Okay. And at some point we should probably talk about like what the book is about.
We will.
Because people may not have read this book.
We're going to do that.
If you're not like under 20, you may not know John Green and him as an author.
Maybe that was true a few years ago, but I think his demographic has aged.
You think it's expanded?
Yeah,
you think they've
so.
aged?
Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah, he has a brand new book out now, actually, which I have not yet read. So no, I heard of this book. I remember for some reason I was reading, this is going to be the most vague story in the world. I was reading something somewhere and I saw, it might have been just a review.
Yeah.
And I saw a description of this book and I went, that sounds like something I would enjoy. I have to read it right now. And I actually bought it on my iPad, which I never do. I don't like reading books on my iPad. Mostly like to read paper books. I have begrudgingly gotten now a Kindle and I will read on the Kindle, but I don't like reading on anything that's backlit. It's one of the older Kindles, to be clear. It's not backlit. It just hurts my eyes. This is a really interesting podcast. And so I got it that night because like I couldn't even wait to like go to the bookstore, and I started reading it and I got about like 3/4 of the way through, and the next morning I had to get up early because I had like a doctor's appointment, just like not a big deal doctor's appointment, just like the eye doctor or something. And I remember I got there like super early, and so I was sitting in the waiting room finishing this book, sobbing in the doctor's office. And so people kept coming in and out like and looking at me in pity because why was I sitting in the doctor's waiting room like crying? Like I must have just gotten some terrible like medical news.
They probably thought it was cancer related.
Yeah, probably. Well, it was an eye doctor, so I guess it could be eye cancer. Well, in the book, there's eye cancer.
There sure is.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of it.
So that was my experience with this book. So let's talk about what this book is about.
Right.
I feel like we're now like 15 minutes into the pod, and
into the what now?
The pod.
Nope.
Yep.
Nope.
Yep. It's the hip lingo that all the young kids today are saying.
Find me a kid who says that.
I don't know any.
We're not saying that.
I don't know any kids.
So I'm going to give a quick synopsis of this.
Okay, you go for it.
All right. So our main character is Hazel. Mm-hmm. Hazel has cancer.
Hazel's full name is Hazel Grace Lancaster.
This is true.
It comes up.
So she has cancer.
Yes.
Stage 4 thyroid cancer that has spread to different parts of her body. Things we learn about her is that her lungs had cancer in them.
Yes.
And they don't work very well as lungs. Yeah. So for the entirety of the story, she actually has an oxygen tank with her.
Yeah.
So that's her. And in a cancer support group, she meets Augustus Waters,
Yes.
who is the manic pixie dream boy,
He is 100% a manic pixie dream boy. We can just agree on that right now.
not necessarily.
Okay.
Not necessarily.
All right.
So she meets him, they fall in love. Yeah. That's the short version of it.
They're both like 16. I don't know if that was clear.
Yeah. So essentially, the way the book is split up, at least from my perspective, is that there's really the plot and the subplot.
Yeah.
So the plot of it is they fall in love. It's their story together.
Yeah.
The subplot is she is obsessed with a particular book called An Imperial Affliction, which is a fictional book that John Green made up. And she's obsessed with the author, and he kinds of envisions this very J.D. Salinger, like modern J.D. Salinger type character who wrote the book and then never wrote another word and moved to Amsterdam and is a recluse. And they she and Augustus kind of come together and end up sharing their love of the book.
Yeah.
And so a huge part of the book is that they actually go to Amsterdam to meet him. Turns out he's an asshole. And
he's the worst. He's a literal monster.
He's just the worst.
Yeah.
And then they come back, and then and this is where we get into
plot twist. Spoiler alert territory. Yeah. Spoiler.
Now, throughout the book, she's the one who is not very healthy.
Yes.
She's the one who has the physical problems.
She is basically alive because the only reason that she's alive is because she's on like a
made-up drug.
And a made-up experimental drug that they have no idea how long she's going to live, but they know it can't possibly be long because she literally can't breathe most of the time.
Right. Augustus, though, the kind of cancer he had, he lost his leg. So we know that early on. He had osteosarcoma. But he's doing fine.
Yep.
He's doing fine.
Lost a leg.
Right. They go to Amsterdam, and then it is revealed that he is not doing fine. He has cancer throughout his whole body. Yeah. And then the last part of the book is he dies. Yeah. And it's very sad.
It's very, very, very sad.
And there's many things that happen. There really aren't. They fall in love, he dies.
Yeah.
It's very, very, very sad. And I don't want anyone to think that like anything I'm saying right now is saying anything about the book not being good.
No, it's a very good book.
It's a very, very good book. And the way John Green handles cancer and handles death is, I think, fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's pretty well known that the book is well researched. And there was actually an actual girl who this character of Hazel was based on, who did pass away, who I think he dedicates the book to her. She's in the acknowledgments or something.
Esther
something. Yeah. Yes. Esther Earl, he dedicates the book to her.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he researched it very well. I mean, I really, really liked it.
Yeah.
I really liked most of it. The parts that I didn't like, I will just be kind of upfront. He is one of those authors where when you're reading it, you go, oh, this is a John Green book. Mm-hmm. Everyone in the world talks like John Green in this book.
Which is interesting and intelligent, but like everybody is that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where this isn't a criticism, it's an observation.
Yeah.
I don't have any particular problem with an author writing everybody in a certain voice. Mm-hmm. As far as film goes, I still love Kevin Smith. I loved Kevin Smith for a really long time. And in a Kevin Smith movie, everybody talks like Kevin Smith. Yeah. And in a Tarantino movie, like everybody's like, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
It didn't hit me. It took me out of it a little bit. It took me out of the book a little bit, which I assume it didn't do for other people.
Yeah.
Did it do that for you?
No, it didn't. It didn't. And I guess part of it is because it's in first person. So you're sort of hearing everything that everybody says through Hazel as a narrator. Mm-hmm. So it could be that, I mean, I don't think this is what we're literally meant to understand, but like if you think about like her sort of translating what people say into her extremely like thoughtful, articulate, mature way of thinking, it could be that it's just like her translating what's kind of being said because she's writing it, so it's kind of her voice.
Yeah. And it's really funny too that like something that I heard John Green responding to the criticism that the teenagers don't sound like teenagers.
Yeah.
Like no teenagers talk like that. And I actually really liked his response to it, which was basically, when people watch Romeo and Juliet, no one says, those don't sound like regular teenagers. Like, he gets really mad about it.
Yeah.
And I actually kind of agree with him on that. The funny part of it is, I have no problem with how the teenagers sound.
Yeah, I don't either.
None whatsoever. But I also, I watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and, like, everyone sounds like Joss Whedon in that show. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, like, I also think that teenagers or children who have been sick and sort of have had to face that very adult experience as children, and also who have mostly been around adults, tend to be the type of sort of hyper articulate, hyper literate, like, child. So, like, the fact that that is part of Hazel's character strikes me as totally believable for her particular situation.
Yeah. And the way he sets up Augustus is this very kind of performative person.
Yeah.
Like, very pretentious.
Yeah.
I don't mean that in a really bad way.
No, I think he's aware of his own pretension in the book.
And so it really works.
Yeah. Augustus has a lot of character traits, like, this is the most pretentious one. Like, he always carries a pack of cigarettes, and he will take a cigarette and put it between his lips, but not light it. He never actually smokes it. And he says, well, it's a metaphor. You take the killing thing and you put it between your lips, but you don't give it the power to kill you. And she kind of says, that's okay. You know, she
like,
kind of...
I get it.
I get it. Yeah,
get it.
That makes sense.
All right.
But I in the book, I feel like the way that Augustus is portrayed is that he is ridiculous in some ways, but he kind of has a sense of the fact that it's ridiculous and doesn't care. He doesn't take himself very seriously, I think, is what kind of gives you a little bit of relief from the fact that he does a lot of things that are super pretentious. Yeah.
I feel like this is actually a really good time. Let's get into the whole Manic Pixie Dream Boy thing.
Yeah.
So I kind of thought, I feel like there's a very common kind of idea that he is a Manic Pixie Dream Boy.
Yeah.
And I feel like, and you can tell me more about this, you can tell me if this is accurate, it feels like this comes from two things.
Yep.
First, it comes from people's actual observations of the character.
Yep.
And two, it comes from the fact that John Green in his other books tends to write Manic Pixie Dream Girls.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
I think that is accurate. Yeah.
Right.
So some of his other books are An Abundance of Catherines, Looking for Alaska, Paper Towns. All of those books are about sort of a nerdy boy and his relationship with kind of a manic pixie dream girl.
Yeah.
So in this book, he's actually writing from the point of view of a girl, and her manic pixie dream boy.
So do you think he's a Manic Pixie Dream Boy?
You know what? When I originally read it, I didn't. It didn't occur to me. When I read it this time, I think what I was thinking, what my observation was that I felt like John Green was actively trying to subvert the trope. John Green, it seems to me, was 100% aware of the trope. He wasn't writing it without awareness of what it was that he was writing, and I think he was trying to actively subvert it. That is my impression just from reading the book without any other knowledge of like what his intention was. But I suppose on this reading, like a couple years after I had originally read it for the first time, and being a little bit older, I guess, it did strike me that I felt like he was a Manic Pixie Dream Boy and the trope had not quite been subverted. It hadn't quite worked. It didn't quite work for me. I'm not attracted to Augustus Waters, and I feel like to be perfectly in the shoes of Hazel, you have to find Augustus very attractive, and to me he's a little boy. But that could just be because I'm 33 years old.
It could be.
You know?
That could be a big part of it. Yeah. No, I kind of did at first think that he was a Manic Pixie Dream Boy. According to the author, so I was listening to some John Green stuff.
Yep.
And he made a point of why he doesn't think that Augustus is a Manic Pixie Dream Boy.
Right.
And having heard his point, I kind of agree with it.
And I would just like to say that it kind of is proving my point because it just shows that he's aware of the trope.
Yes.
Like he's aware of what that is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what did he say about it?
So he said that when he thinks of a Manic Pixie Dream Girl, in the stories where they exist, I'm not, this is not a direct quote. This is me kind of coming up with an analogy for how I think he was saying it.
Okay, go ahead.
they don't really have flaws.
Right.
And if they do have flaws, it just adds to their character.
They're just like quirky.
Yeah, it's kind of like the analogy. The only thing I can think of is like when someone goes to a job interview and they're like, "What's your biggest flaw?" And they're like, "I work too hard."
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing.
What's your biggest flaw? I'm too eccentric.
I'm too eccentric, you know? And that's his view of what a manic pixie dream girl is.
Okay.
Whereas in The Fault in Our Stars, Augustus is a character who absolutely has flaws, and over the course of the book we see those flaws.
Mm-hmm.
And he becomes a very flawed character.
Yeah.
And so in that way, I do think it is I do think he succeeded in subverting the trope of the manic pixie dream person.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I would maybe disagree a little bit with the idea that the manic pixie dream girl doesn't have flaws, though, because I feel like, to me, the manic pixie dream girl is kind of like a classic tragic hero, which is that they are eventually brought down by their tragic flaw. And with the manic pixie dream girl, it's always that they are sort of emotionally disturbed in some way. You find out that like they actually, like, think of like who's the classic one, Natalie Portman in Garden State, right?
Yeah.
Like you find out she's really emotionally broken. Or there, what was that terrible movie?
I think that just speaks to how brilliant Zach Braff is, though.
Yeah. Or the other, like, oh my gosh, what was that terrible movie? Sweet November? Do you remember that with Keanu Reeves and Charlize Theron?
I don't remember a terrible movie named Sweet November. I remember an amazing movie named Sweet November.
It was the worst movie I've ever seen.
I haven't seen it.
Oh, okay. Well, she's a manic pixie dream girl, and her tragic flaw is that she's dying.
Right.
So, like,
God, everybody's dying.
yeah, right. So anyway, I guess I would just kind of disagree. I don't. To me, it's not the point of that trope is not that they're perfect. It's in fact, it's they end up being non-overcomably flawed in some way.
Non-overcomably?
That's not a word. I just made that up.
Sounds like a word in a John Green book.
Yeah, there it is.
There we go.
Cool.
Yeah, he uses the word condomy, which I love.
Well, you just spoiled something.
They have sex.
Yeah,
they have sex.
They do.
And they use condoms.
They do.
You were saying how you liked that he makes a point of saying that the first time they have sex, it's safe sex.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
I think they only have sex one time, so it's the first and last time,
But
tragically.
but still is the first time.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
No, true.
I didn't say it was the first of many.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have sex once.
Yeah.
So that's the book.
Yeah.
I
we
liked
did,
it.
Yeah. We didn't spend a lot of time on it, but I feel like we're going to kind of talk about it when we talk about the movie.
I will say, just kind of some other thoughts. It only made me cry once.
The book?
Yeah.
Okay.
It only made me cry once. And in order to talk about that, I think it's important. We talked about what the two plots are.
Yes.
But let's talk about some of the themes of it.
Okay.
What would you think, is one of the central themes of the book regarding how Hazel feels about everyone else around her?
She is...
Like her parents.
Her main source of concern is what will happen to them after she dies. What will happen to everyone who cares for her. And she refers to herself as a grenade. She said, I'm going to explode and destroy everyone. And it's my responsibility to minimize the damage as much as possible.
Which I think is a really, really good theme.
Yeah.
I think that's very real.
Yep.
And I think John Green expresses that through a really, really good literary device.
Yes.
Which is the book within a book.
Right.
An Imperial Affliction.
Right. So we didn't really talk about this, but the book that
We're talking about it now.
The book that she loves so much, An Imperial Affliction, is about a girl with cancer. And that she's her mother and like her mother's boyfriend and her hamster and blah, 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 blah. All of the people around her that love her. And the thing about this book is the made up book is that it has a literary device in that, which is that it ends in the middle of a sentence. And so the idea is like, that's how death works. You don't get to wrap things up neatly in a bow. Things just end, you die, and that's what happened.
Right.
But Hazel has this obsession with finding out what happened to the other characters after the book ended. Was what happened to the hamster, what happened to the Dutch tulip man, what happened to Anna's mother. Was her mother okay?
Right. So her big obsession is contacting the author
and finding out,
Yeah.
tell me what happened after the book ends. And when she meets him, apart from him being a monster, which is separate, and he's just a horrible, unhappy person, what he says to her is the truth, which is nothing happens to them. It's a book. It ends when the book ends. They don't have lives outside of this book. That's not how it works. And she says, basically, fuck you, make something up. Because she needs to know that her parents are going to be okay.
Yeah.
And then they're in Amsterdam at this time, and then they go to the Anne Frank house, and there's the whole thing about, this is a real life thing, which is that Otto Frank, Anne Frank's father, was the only person in his family to survive. And there's the whole scene where they're in the Anne Frank house and they're listening to a recording of his voice. And he's talking about how when he read Anne's diary, he found it so surprising because she had all of these deep thoughts that he was very surprised by, and that he had thought that they had a very close relationship, but he realized no parent ever knows their child. And I think that's the thing that makes her feel like it's one of the things that makes her feel like it's going to be okay. That if Anne Frank's dad can survive and go on and be okay and be a person, then her parents can survive too. And that's the thing. That's when she and Augustus kiss for the first time, because she's kind of letting down those barriers and going, okay, I'm going to let you love me.
Right.
Right.
So that's the subtext.
Yes.
And then, so there is a scene towards the end where she basically kind of says all this to her parents.
Right.
And her mom tells her, well, what I've been doing for the last year is I've actually been studying to get a master's in social work.
Yeah.
This is what my plan is. I want to help people who have gone through what we're going through. And that's the scene that made me cry.
Right.
That's the only scene that made me cry, is because throughout the entire book, he's been planting seeds for this idea that Hazel thinks that she thinks sometimes that there's something she brings up that after a child dies, there's a 50% chance the parents are going to get divorced.
Right.
She thinks her parents are not going to be okay.
Yeah.
And this is the first time that she sees her parents talking about the life that they will have after she dies.
Yeah.
And that they will have a life.
Yeah.
And that they are going to survive.
Yeah.
That scene made me cry.
Yeah.
That was the one scene that made me cry.
Yeah.
None of the death scenes. Maybe there's a scene where Augustus is about to die and he hosts his own pre-funeral and he asks Hazel and their friend Isaac to read eulogies for him. And that's it's really, really good, and it's really well written. And that got to me a little bit. But the idea that her parents will be okay and her mom was doing something productive like this, that made me cry.
Do you find...
Also, my mom's a social worker.
Yes.
Yeah.
Your mom's a social worker. Do you find that...
But I'm fine.
Are you okay now?
I'm good. I'm good.
Do you find that as you maybe have gotten north of 30, because this has absolutely happened to me, that even though I'm not a parent, when I read things like this, I absolutely identify with the parent more than the child.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's very weird.
Yeah, and it's from two things. It's one is the fact that I'm getting older, but two is the fact that I've spent the last probably 15 years starting to see my parents as people and not as parents.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's happened to you as well. I think that happens to most people.
Yeah.
And so now it's really allowed me to look back at my childhood in a different way, because when I look back at my childhood in my early 20s, I was looking back at it through the lens of, well, that was me going through it, so this was my experience. But now looking back at it, I think, well, geez, that was a kid, but my parents were closer to my age at that time. I think I can see where they were coming from when I was being a little shit or something like that.
Right. Right.
So I think it's both those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
But that whole aspect of the book really got to me.
Yeah.
I really, really appreciated that.
Yeah.
It's a good book.
Yeah.
So that's the book.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else to say about the book?
I do a little bit, but let's turn to the movie and we can kind of meld it together as we go. I have a lot of notes. I took a lot of notes on the movie.
Did you know?
I did.
So The Fault in Our Stars was made into a movie in 2014, and it was directed by Josh Boone. Mm-hmm. He had directed one movie before that at that point.
Is it a movie either of us would be familiar with?
It is not a movie that either of us have seen. It was called Stuck in Love.
Okay,
I don't think you've seen Stuck in Love.
Nope.
I have not seen it. It came out in 2014.
Yep.
It was written by two screenwriters who were not John Green.
Okay.
Scott Neustadter and Michael Weber
Okay.
directed it. And it had a very good cast.
Very good cast.
An actress named Shailene Woodley played Hazel. Ansel Elgort played Augustus. He was in Baby Driver, if anyone's seen that. Laura Dern is the mom. A guy named Sam Trammell is the dad. Willem Dafoe plays Peter Van Houten.
The author. The monster author.
So that's like the main cast at that point.
And I kind of want to say that we're going to start to get into some criticism of this film, but like, I don't think that any of the actors did a bad job.
I don't think any of them did.
I don't think that anything that we are about to say was the fault of any of the actors. I think they were all actually pretty good.
I just imagine someone listening to this who absolutely loves the movie, and they're hearing us say this and going like, wait,
what do you mean?
What do you mean you don't blame them for anything?
What?
For making a wonderful movie?
Yeah. But let's not get too negative. What did you like about the movie? Let's start with that.
The cast. The cast is great.
Yeah.
It is a really, really well cast movie in most cases.
Yeah.
I will say this, like, Shailene Woodley has to carry the movie. She carries the movie.
Yeah.
She really, really does.
Yeah.
It's funny, like, while we were watching it together, you had a couple of things to say in terms of criticizing, like, how they made her up to look as like someone who has cancer.
Yeah.
And I think they're all pretty minor. Do you want to repeat any of that?
What?
You just said she looks great.
She looks great.
Oftentimes she looks great.
Always throughout the movie. She never looks any sicker or any better. She always just looks great.
Yeah. I don't think there's much you can do about that.
Well, here's what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I think what they did was, because there's a lot of close-ups of her face, so you can kind of see, like, I don't think she's wearing any makeup, or very little, because you can actually see, like, the pores of her skin and the pores of her face. And I think they may have thought, well, people who aren't wearing makeup on camera look sickly, so we'll just not put any makeup on her, and we don't need to do anything else to make her look worse, because everyone else will have makeup on. Mm-hmm. But I think the problem with that is that she is so beautiful and has such lovely glowing skin and like beautiful eyes and like fantastic eyebrows. Mm-hmm. She's very pretty. She's very pretty. That it didn't work, because even without makeup, even on camera without makeup, she still looks great. I think maybe they put like a little bit of like white lip gloss on her to make her look like a little more pale. Mm-hmm. But yeah, she just looked great throughout the film.
And to be totally honest, I don't think I have anything else to say about her.
Yeah.
Except for the fact that she's really good.
Yeah.
She's really good. She carries the movie.
Yeah. I mean, something that we have often talked about in terms of casting is the ages of people who are playing teenagers.
This is true.
And I did do a tiny bit of research on that.
Mm-hmm.
So
I know this is a big thing for you.
Yeah, it is a big thing for me. Well, because I'm watching going, they look good. They look young. They don't look, I'm not going, she's 30 if she's a day. But I think that our perception of what like 16-year-olds look like actually is super skewed from movies and TV.
Oh, it absolutely
because we
is.
see 25-year-olds playing 16-year-olds all the time. If you look at an actual 16-year-old, like that is a baby, like that is a child. So she, when this movie came out, she was 23. Mm-hmm. Augustus was 20. And he looks young. Like, he's got, like, a baby face. Mm-hmm. And the actor who played Isaac was also only 20.
Okay.
So pretty close. Pretty close to teenagers. So he's 20 playing 18. Like, that's not crazy. She's 23 playing 17, which is a little bit more of a stretch. But she definitely looks young. So in the film, in the film and the book, actually, the way that Hazel and Augustus meet is they go to a cancer support group for teenagers. Do you want to talk about that support group? Because one character we have not mentioned is the leader of the support group.
What's his name? It's like Patrick or something.
Patrick? Something like that.
His name doesn't matter.
His name is not important.
In the book, he's not much of anything. He's like a 2-page joke.
She just detests him.
Yeah.
Like, she just thinks he's corny and awful.
In the movie,
he's played
by Mike Birbiglia.
Yeah.
who is a delight, and I think he's great.
At one point, Jeremy was like cracking up at something he was doing, and I said, "You're only laughing because it's Mike Birbiglia," and he said, "No, I'm laughing because it's funny."
Yeah. Laughter is a side effect. Laughter is not a side effect of Mike Birbiglia.
Oh, boy.
Laughter is a side effect of things being funny.
That was a very, very bad adaptation of a quote from the book.
Yeah.
Yep.
That doesn't matter. I've read it.
So
he's great, though.
Yeah.
And he's only in a couple of scenes, but he's really, really good.
And another character who they know from support group is Isaac. And Isaac's story is quite tragic because he had retinoblastoma, which is eye cancer, as a child, and he's had one eye ever since, which has been fine. But they recently discovered it came back and it's in his other eye. So they have to remove his second eye and he's going to be completely blind. So he's going from one eye to no eyes, which is a big change. And he has a girlfriend.
Except he doesn't.
Because she didn't want to dump a blind man, so she dumps him before his surgery.
Yeah. Poor Isaac.
Yeah. That's really it for Isaac. I feel like the biggest difference between his character in the book and the movie is in the book he's much more pathetic. Like pitiful, I guess I would say.
Pitiable.
Like pitiable. Well, like there's a scene where Hazel calls Augustus, and Isaac is over at Augustus's house having just been dumped by his hot girlfriend, and basically how it's described is you can just hear loud, intense sobbing in the background. And then when she gets to the house, you can like hear it from the street, and she goes inside and the dad is like, "Yeah, I've got earplugs in," and Augustus's mom just had to go out. Like she couldn't take the noise anymore. So it's really set up. In the movie, he's just kind of like singing loudly, and then she gets there and like he's got like a single tear coursing down his cheek.
Well, this is a problem I actually have with the movie.
Yeah.
This is a problem I have.
Yeah.
In terms of crying, there's a lot of crying in this movie.
Yeah.
I honestly feel, having watched it a couple of times now, there's only 2 actors in the course of the movie who actually shed real tears.
Okay.
And it's Shailene Woodley and Ansel Elgort towards the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Every other time you see a character crying, they're not crying. They're acting like they're crying.
And that's kind of unfortunate because in terms of the dad, like one of the things that she says about him in the book is like, my dad cries at everything. Yeah, my dad is a crier.
In the course of the movie, there's like one moment where he starts to cry. He's like picking them up at the airport after they've gotten back from Amsterdam. And for 1 second, he like starts to well up, but then he's gone.
I just think it would have been better to cast an actor that could like cry on the drop of a hat for a character who's explicitly described as cries at everything. And the mom in the book is kind of described as she holds it together a little bit better. And Laura Dern is constantly like quite emotional.
So I'm going to go ahead and say that this will be a good time to talk about your favorite segment and mine. The female part is a little underwritten.
Female character is a little underwritten.
The female character is a little underwritten.
We're going to put a twist on it, though, for this episode. The adults are a little underwritten.
All of them.
Mm-hmm. And
would you like to expand on that?
Yes, I think this is really important. I would say this is probably my overarching criticism of the film, and we can get into more stuff later. But so what we just talked about was that Hazel's sort of driving force throughout the book and the movie is her concern for what is going to happen to her parents after she dies. And the problem is that she cares about that very, very, very deeply. That is the thing that she, as a character, cares about. But the problem is that we, as the viewer, can't care about that because we don't know anything about who her parents are. We don't know them as human beings. And thus, it is hard for us to care about their emotional state or what's going to happen to them because they're just sort of ciphers. And the thing that I think John Green does really well in the book is the parents throughout, Hazel's parents and Augustus's parents and the other parents that we meet and the other adults, they're not just generic cookie cutter adults. All of them are treated as like individual human beings with individual personalities. And so it's kind of easy to predict like what they will do or what will happen or what they'll say in any given circumstance. Like we know, we understand how Augustus's mom is different from Hazel's mom and Augustus's dad is different from Hazel's dad. But in the movie, they're all just...
There are even, just not to interrupt, but like there are even moments in the book where their parents talk to each other.
Yeah.
And you really get the sense that the only thing her parents have in common is the fact that they have kids that have cancer.
Right.
Yeah.
They would not be friends otherwise.
Right.
And it's just really hard. It makes me worry that the filmmakers, by not making the parents into interesting, important characters, actually don't understand what the book was about.
Yeah.
Because the book is about her need to know that her parents will be okay.
Mm-hmm. There's one. So I listened to the commentary.
Yep.
And the commentary is Josh Boone sitting down with John Green to talk about the movie. One thing I found out is that John Green was there most of the time. Mm-hmm. They had a very good relationship. He seems very, very happy with how it turned out. Mm-hmm. So we'll certainly take that into consideration for everything we're saying.
Maybe John Green doesn't know what his book is about.
Or maybe we don't. One of us is wrong, and it could be us because we didn't write it. But this is our podcast, so we're going to say all this stuff.
That's right.
But there's a scene when Augustus brings Hazel home to his house, and he meets his parents she meets his parents for the first time, and we, as the audience, meet his parents for the first time.
That was tough. Got through it.
And it's a short little scene, and his parents are a little embarrassing, and Augustus just wants to get her out of the room. And Josh Boone was talking about it, and he says, "Oh, this was so important to me. I just really, really wanted the parents to be embarrassing in this scene."
Oof.
And it really, having seen the movie and felt this way about it, that made sense to me.
Oof.
Is that I really felt like he was looking at it. He says, I really wanted the two kids. I really wanted Hazel and Gus to be the main characters of this movie, and everything is through their eyes. So the parents are embarrassing.
Yeah.
But that's not the book.
She doesn't feel that her parents are embarrassing. He doesn't feel that his parents are embarrassing.
I never get that from the book.
Yeah. She loves her parents.
Mm-hmm.
She loves her parents a lot. Like, her parents are the ones trying to get her out of the house and go to support group and be with other children. Like, mm-hmm. she's like, no, we're going to sit at home and watch America's Next Top Model and it'll be great.
Yeah. I mean, I would say as evidence for the fact that, like, Augustus in the book actually does care for his parents is that one of the running things of the book is that before he lost his leg, he was a really good basketball player.
Yeah.
And he has lots of trophies and everything like that. And his parents have kind of latched onto basketball as the thing they can do that will make him happy.
Yeah.
So they get him signed basketballs and jerseys.
Well, like when he was sick.
When he was sick.
That's what you get in the hospital. Like, the basketball player comes
right.
and signs a ball for you or whatever.
And we find out in the book and the movie that he's been trying to break it to his dad that he doesn't actually like basketball that much. But the way he says that, like, this is a son saying, I've been trying to figure out how to break it to my dad that I don't actually like basketball.
Yeah.
This is not, like, if this was someone who was just really painfully embarrassed by their parents and didn't really care about them as people, they would have just said, I don't like basketball.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's actually that's a compassionate thing to do.
Yeah. And Hazel late in the book and also the movie has this sort of intense interaction with her parents that for pretty much the first time in her life, she's trying to do something that they don't want her to do. She's Augustus has called her and said, come over to the church. We're going to do this mock funeral, this pre-funeral. And she's like, okay, I'm coming right now. And her parents are like, no, we're sitting down to dinner. And she's like, no, I'm going. And they're like, no, Hazel, like, we are disciplining you. You cannot leave the house. You're not allowed. And she basically has this sort of eruption, like, what are you talking about? What do you mean I can't do something? My boyfriend is dying. I'm dying. You're not acknowledging it. And by the way, I don't think you're going to be okay. And it kind of turns into this whole situation. Mm-hmm. And again, like, if she didn't care about her parents and found them embarrassing and didn't care about their feelings, either that conversation would have happened much earlier or it would never happen. But it was sort of the moment that she felt like she needs to be honest with her parents about what's going on because she's sort of guarding their feelings because she knows that they're going to be destroyed when she dies.
When she explodes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think all of the adults are just kind of underwritten in the movie.
Yeah, just really, especially the dad. The dad in the book is so lovely, and I love the detail that, like, he's the emotional one and he's the one that cries at everything, and they have the reason that I wanted you to see the movie with me originally, like 3 years ago, was there's a scene in the book where she and her dad just have this beautiful conversation about like what his feelings about, like, the meaning of life are, essentially, or like the possibility of an afterlife or whatever. And
oh my God.
he tells her,
I can't believe I forgot about this. That was the
Yeah.
other scene that made me cry.
right, yeah.
That scene 100% made me cry
Yeah.
in the book.
And I was and the scene ends with this like just adorable exchange between them that she says, you are very smart, and he says something like, you are very good at giving compliments, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm paraphrasing. And I remember going to see the movie in the theater and being so excited to see that scene. And it's not in the movie.
Does not happen.
Does not happen.
No.
Never happens. And that's just, to me, that scene is the dad. Like, that is the character of the dad. And for that scene not to be there, to me, means they are not making a commitment to fully fleshing out her parents as people, which is unfortunate, because I feel like this is one of the very, very few, like you were saying before, teenagers don't see their parents as human beings, as people. And I feel like this is one of the very few books about a teenager from a teenager's perspective where she truly does see her parents as people. And to not have that reflected in the movie, I think, is a shame.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So thus concludes
The adults are a little underwritten.
the adults are a little underwritten.
My other big criticism, I guess I do have one big criticism about Hazel's character and how she's portrayed, and we talked about this a little bit. She only really seems, so she's on an oxygen tank. She has an oxygen tank that she carries around with her in a little cart, and she has nasal cannulas. She always wears it. It's very important. It's very important in the book. And I remember when they announced that they were making the movie of this book, there was a lot of concern that they wouldn't have her wearing her oxygen cannula in the movie, because no actress would want, they wouldn't want the actress like not to be pretty.
Right.
Do you know, in quotes, of course.
Sure.
Like by wearing
I can completely understand people having that concern.
by wearing this medical equipment on her face.
Right.
And so I think something they did that was good was they do always have her wear it. But and she has very bad lungs. She has a lot of cancer in her lungs, and they fill up with fluid, and she sometimes gets very, very sick. And they have to go and drain. She's like to have a drain in her lungs. But especially towards the beginning of the movie, particularly, like, really she only ever kind of seems sick or out of breath when it's sort of important to the plot that she is sick or out of breath or tired or has a hard time standing for a long time or whatever. And I feel like that kind of does her, I just feel like it kind of does the book and the character a disservice, because again, one of the points of the book is like, when you are sick all the time. You have good days and bad days, but you are always sort of a baseline level of sick, and you always have that thing that you have to deal with all the time, every day. And I wish that I had seen her being sick being more of a problem for her, just on sort of a baseline level throughout. Like, they go to Amsterdam and they're walking all around, and she can't walk all around. Like, she is too sick. She can't breathe very well. And so when they're in the Anne Frank house, it's a huge plot point that she powers through and she climbs the stairs and she does it, and that's great. Like, they really portrayed that exactly as it's shown in the book. Like, she gets to the top and
that's one of the best scenes in the movie.
Can't catch her breath. It was a really good scene.
And just to be clear, there's a lot of really good stuff in the movie.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, but go on.
But I just wish they had been consistent with how sick she was. That's really all. That's really all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So while I think that there is a lot of really good stuff in the movie, there are some things that were really clear to me watching it, and since I've since found out that it was kind of accurate, is the movie feels extremely rushed. The production of it.
You mean not the pace of the movie,
No,
but just
not the
the
pace
way
of
that it's
well,
made.
the pace of the movie feels a little rushed at times.
Yeah.
But that's not what I mean.
Yeah.
What I mean is the production of it was rushed.
Yeah.
So I'm just a big believer, and just from everything I've heard and from everything I've seen and experienced, that a good amount of rehearsal
Yeah.
really, really helps performances in a movie, especially a movie that is driven by talking
Yes.
as much as this movie is.
And deepening of relationships.
Exactly.
Like, that's sort of the plot of the movie.
This movie feels to me like a movie where everybody showed up on set, having learned their lines, and got to do every scene for the first time in front of the cameras.
And do you have do you know anything about whether or not that's accurate?
All I know is that they shot the entire movie in 35 days.
Okay, well, and that includes Amsterdam.
That's a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
That is not a long time at all. So there were a lot of times where, like, I really get the sense that, you know, like any movie is shot out of order, but more than any, like any scene that is outside, that is at the exterior of Hazel's house, they shot in like a day or two.
Yeah.
Everything.
They just
over
shot
the course of the
everything.
entire movie.
Yeah.
And it feels like it. So I have a couple of reasons that I feel this and a couple of examples. One, I think one of the best actors in the movie didn't do a great job.
Yes.
And that's Laura Dern.
And this is our second Laura Dern movie that we've discussed on this podcast.
I am a Laura Dern fan.
Yes.
I think she is a fine actress. And I think if they told me, oh no, we shot for 2 or 3 months and we had lots of rehearsal time, I would say, oh, well then why? She didn't turn in a very good performance. But if you tell me this was a very short schedule and there was no rehearsal time.
And she was maybe on set for 5 days.
I literally think she was there for a week.
Yeah.
I wasn't really able to find anything out about how long she was actually there, but there's the problem that I have with her character where every single scene she's in, she is exactly the same.
Yeah.
There is no arc for her over the course of the movie.
Yeah.
She feels exactly the same in every scene, and she's very heightened.
Yeah.
Her energy is very, very heightened. She really feels manic. Not like manic pixie dream girl, but like
but just
manic.
like she got too much energy.
She got way too much energy. And I actually really don't think she comes off that well in the movie.
Yeah.
And I think that really just is a result of the fact that I don't think she got any rehearsal time.
Yeah.
I don't think they got to figure out what they were going to do beforehand.
Well, and I didn't feel that she and Shailene Woodley, like I didn't get the depth of the relationship between them. Like in the book, she and her mother have a very strong relationship, and she and her father have a very strong relationship, and those two relationships are not the same, which is great. I think it's really well done in the book, but like you don't really get the sense of it. She's just sort of this generic parent of a cancer child,
which is crazy because apparently they actually did get really close.
Yeah.
Apparently they like hung out and went to Hawaii together before they shot the movie, and like she got really close with Laura Dern and her kids.
That's great.
So apparently they did have a very close relationship, but it doesn't really come across on screen.
Yeah.
And I blame the director for that.
Yeah.
So one of the things he was saying in his commentary is that the way he directs is he really likes to just hire the best people and let them do their thing.
Yeah.
I think that's a problem.
Yeah.
In this particular case, I think that's a problem.
Yeah.
I think they could have stood to have someone with a clearer vision, who had a clearer idea of what the arcs of the characters would be over the course of the film.
Yeah, especially if you're doing it out of order and on a short schedule.
Yeah. Like you have to be able to look to someone and say, like, how should I be in this scene? And if what he was saying was, yeah, you got this. You got this.
Yeah.
Be what you're doing. You're going to have someone who feels really weirdly consistent across the entire movie. Not consistent in a good way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But there's no arc to their performance.
Right.
One thing you did notice was when they went to Amsterdam and they were doing like exterior shots in Amsterdam, you said, oh, Laura Dern didn't come with them. And I was kind of like, what do you mean she's right there? And you're like, no, that is a different person.
Yep.
And it was just the back of someone's blonde head with a hat on, and you never saw their face.
Yeah, there's no hat, but like her wig is big.
Oh, really? I
like
thought there was a hat.
No, just her hair is bigger.
Okay.
She just doesn't look like Laura Dern.
Yeah.
She's like clearly shorter than Laura Dern and has bigger hair than Laura Dern. And like she's just not there.
Yeah.
And then when they're in Amsterdam, she goes with Hazel and Augustus to Amsterdam. Every single scene she's in is in an interior of the hotel that they're staying in. So clearly, which they shot in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Where they shot it, which we will absolutely get into kind of where they shot it and everything.
Totally.
So then there's one other thing that I saw throughout the movie that really struck me as being a result of no rehearsal. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of times where it really felt like everyone was making things up as they went along. So 2 things I can think of. There's a scene when she's having dinner with her parents, and she's looking down at her phone the entire time because Augustus is texting her.
Yeah.
And her mom is talking about goji berries.
Yeah.
And talking about how she made the whole meal out of goji berries, and she made this thing. And she and the dad have to have a conversation about goji berries. And it's the most boring conversation. It's the most boring, unrealistic conversation I've ever heard. It sounds like people being told, oh, you need to have a conversation about goji berries. And they're like, oh, man, goji, these are good.
Like, it sounds like a conversation that they're being told this is just going to be background. And so just like talk, but then they actually kind of put it in the film as if it were lines.
Yeah, and it doesn't work at all. There's a scene when they drive up to their house, and Augustus is there to meet her, and he's wearing a sports jersey,
Basketball.
He's wearing a basketball jersey.
Basketball shirt.
For a player.
Yeah.
Who I can't remember.
Rick Smits.
Rick Smits. And the dad's really into it.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I feel like when you're writing a book, you can have two characters have an interaction, and they say, like, maybe one of the characters says a line.
Yeah.
And then one of them starts to have a conversation with the main character, but you don't hear from the other character anymore.
And you don't have to make up the rest of that conversation.
Like, you just imagine that they are living their life and they are saying other things. And so in the scene, in the book, her dad walks up to him and goes, Rick Smits, that's great. I love him. And then Augustus starts talking to Hazel.
Yeah.
I don't get the sense that her dad walks up to him, says that, and then says nothing else and walks into the house. And it's a really long walk into the house.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what happens in the movie. They literally do it line for line, but there's nothing beyond that one line. The dad just walks up to this kid he's never met and goes, I love Rick Smits, and then walks away.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like, I really think it doesn't work. And I think rehearsal would have given them more of that.
Yeah. I agree.
So that's kind of how I feel. The movie just feels really rushed to me.
I agree. I suppose, given that, though, I am impressed. I thought that Hazel and Augustus in the movie had excellent chemistry between them.
I agree with that. I think they're very, very good actors.
And, of course, those two actors know each other because they did the whole Divergent series together.
Right.
So they, I guess, maybe had that to build on.
And they also got to spend the most time together of anybody in the cast.
Yeah.
Like, I really, really think Laura Dern was there for a week.
Yeah.
That's what it felt
That
like.
doesn't surprise me at all.
But the two of them had to be there the entire time.
Yeah.
So I think it makes more sense that they have more chemistry.
I had some other stuff to say about the movie making, which was number one. While we were watching, I looked up where they shot it, which you I guess already knew. But like, I was watching this, going, I'm impressed by how little Indianapolis looks like LA. Where did they shoot it? And they shot it in Pittsburgh, which is.
What is your connection to Indianapolis?
So I lived in Indianapolis for 2 years. I was there my final 2 years of high school. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely like some Indianapolis realness in this movie. When they go downstairs so he goes to North Central High School, which is a real high school in Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. It is the high school that I would have gone to had I not gone to private school.
Gotcha.
So it was right by my house.
Now everybody knows that about you.
Yes. The North Central Panthers, we were the private school down the street. We were the Park Tudor Panthers. We were both the Panthers, and our colors were the same.
For real?
Yep.
Are they affiliated?
No.
That's weird.
Total coincidence.
Who was the Panther first?
I
think we know it was North Central.
I have no idea.
Okay. I don't think it was the private school.
But when he goes down the stairs into his basement, there's like a North Central banner, and that is the actual logo. Like they clearly did enough research to go to North Central High School and get like an actual North Central Panthers banner, which I thought was cool.
Yeah.
He's also wearing, a couple times in the movie, a Butler University t-shirt. Butler University is in Indianapolis. The sculpture park that they go to,
It's called Funky Bones.
Yes. Well, what they say is it's the sculpture park behind the Indianapolis Museum of Art, mm-hmm. which is a real thing. Mm-hmm. The sculpture park they go to in the movie looks nothing like the real one. I have been there. My junior prom was there, mm-hmm. so I know it very well. Looks nothing like it. In the movie, it was just sort of like a field with a sculpture in it. Like mm-hmm. There's actually like a very beautiful sculpture garden at the art museum.
But it turns out, so I found out something.
Yeah.
Did you know John Green's connection to Funky Bones?
No.
His wife curated that exhibit.
Oh, that's interesting.
He put it in the book as a nod to her.
John Green is also from Indianapolis. Like,
right.
He knows Indianapolis very well.
That's why it's set there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So apparently they actually went through a lot to recreate Funky Bones for the movie. Uh-huh. And apparently it's exactly the same.
That's great.
Like, literally exactly the same. And they had to tear it down because the artist was like, there can only be one of these.
Yeah.
I'll help you make one for the movie, but there really can only be one of these in existence, so it needs to be destroyed
You can't
afterwards.
do it's like if you go to an art museum to paint a copy, you can't paint it the exact same size as like the Mona Lisa. It has to be either bigger or smaller, so
right.
no one can think you can't sell it pretending it's the real one.
Yeah.
So the other interesting thing was that the Children's Hospital in Indianapolis obviously declined to lend their name mm-hmm. and logo because in the movie, it's just like the Children's Hospital of Indianapolis, but the actual Children's Hospital is Riley Children's Hospital, and the logo is completely different. But it's a real place. Like in the book, when she says, I go to Children's, like there is a big children's hospital in Indianapolis. I think that was it. Oh, yeah. So in the movie, in the book, they get on a plane because they're going to Amsterdam. And in the book, quite realistically, Augustus has never been on a plane before.
It's real cute.
It's real cute. But in the book, quite realistically, the plane that they get onto is like they have to fly through like New York or something, and then they get on a bigger plane. She says very specifically, we had to fly to New York and then we had to get on a bigger plane and go to Amsterdam. In the movie, it's very clear that they go to the airport and get on a direct flight from Indianapolis to Amsterdam. You cannot get a direct flight from Indianapolis to Amsterdam. You cannot do it. So the Indianapolis International Airport does like a flight a day to Toronto and like maybe a flight to Cancun. Those are the international destinations that you can get to direct from Indianapolis. You absolutely have to fly through Chicago or Detroit or DC or New York if you want to leave the country and you are in Indianapolis. I know this very well because I studied abroad and had to go home and could never get a direct flight anywhere that I ever wanted to go. And it's terrible. And so that is something that I know very well from experience.
I will just say,
yes,
in the filmmaker's defense, I think it's fine. I think it's okay that they did that. I can almost hear their eyes rolling from here.
I'm just saying, I guess what I'm saying, like, then set it, if it doesn't matter that it's in Indianapolis, then set it somewhere else. Like, do you know what I mean? But if it does matter that it's in Indianapolis, then why not, like, have it be moderately realistic?
I think they did a pretty good job.
All right.
I think they did a good job. I think John Green said something about it that I thought was nice. He says, no, it's great. They found the flattest parts of Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And then they set it there.
Yeah.
Which I think makes a lot of sense.
Totally. Do you know anything? Should we talk about Amsterdam?
Yes, let's talk about Amsterdam.
Do you know anything about how they shot the restaurant scene in Amsterdam?
I found out a little bit about that.
Okay, I would like to hear about that.
So this was a low-budget movie.
Yeah.
This movie was, I think, $12 or $13 million. Do you know how much it made on a $12 or $13 million budget?
I don't know how much.
Over $300 million.
Wow.
It did very well.
That's great.
It did really, really
well.
That's
fantastic.
I
hope everyone that bought a ticket listens to this podcast.
I hope so. That would be like 12 people.
That would be great.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I don't understand math. So it was a very low budget movie shot in a very short amount of time. They were shot in Amsterdam for a few days, like literally just a few days to get some exteriors and things of them in like a train car and stuff like that. There is an entire scene in the book, a very long scene where they go out to dinner together the night before they're going to meet the author.
It's kind of like the central, like, it's the scene where they fall in love.
Exactly.
Or where she falls in love with him.
And it's in the book, very famously set right on the river.
The canal.
Right on the canal, outside the restaurant.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful.
Flower petals dropping from the trees.
So I had just kind of made the assumption that they just said, oh, we're not going to do that. We can't afford that.
Yeah.
They looked. They tried. They did location scouting. And the thing that they found out was there was so little light in Amsterdam that in order for them to accurately fully light the scene was just going to be beyond their budget.
Yeah.
So they just said, rather than make it look bad outside, we'll just set the whole thing inside.
So it wasn't that they couldn't get a location, it was that they couldn't light it.
Exactly.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So that entire scene takes place inside.
So was that interior in Amsterdam or was it in Pittsburgh?
They said it was above a bar.
In Pittsburgh.
In Pittsburgh.
Yeah. I literally wrote down it looks like a hotel dining room.
Yeah. Yeah. But they made the whole restaurant.
Yeah.
They created it.
I see.
But yeah, that's again, the whole movie was very low budget.
Yeah.
And I was actually surprised at how many things in the movie were visual effects shots. Like there's a scene after the two of them make sex for the first time.
That's kind of like when she says, I'm going to take pot. And her dad's like, you don't take pot.
Yeah.
Like, do you know how this works? I'm not sure you know how this works.
They make sex for the first time.
You don't make sex.
And there's a really, really sweet scene where the two of them are kind of lying in each other's arms and you see his stump leg.
Yes.
Because he only has one leg.
Yeah.
He has removed his...
prosthetic.
His prosthetic.
Which I kept calling a wooden leg.
Yeah.
By accident. That's really offensive.
Yeah. He removes his prosthetic. And so it
His
just
prosthetic limb.
Yeah. And I just made the assumption that the way they shot that was it was like a prop and they had his leg in the bed. That was a visual effects shot.
What
so
you
that
said,
was digital.
So it was CGI.
It was CGI.
So I said, is it CGI? And you said, nope.
No, I didn't say no. I just said, like, I can't imagine why they would have done that.
Yeah.
I assumed doing it for real would have been easier. Apparently, I'm wrong.
Well, what you said was, he's probably got his leg through a hole in the bed. And I said, that is the least sexy thing I can possibly imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. I made an assumption. I was wrong about that.
No, that's fine.
It's a movie that was forced to be very inventive because of its low budget. And I think sometimes succeeded and sometimes didn't.
Yeah.
Like, all the interiors, the supposed quote unquote interiors in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
There's just
Didn't look great.
Like I'm pretty sure the outlets are all American.
The light switches were definitely American.
Yeah, it doesn't look it's fine.
Yeah.
There's a lot of attention to detail throughout the movie. And I think
really is.
This is kind of a lacking attention to detail.
Oh, really? Because I thought the attention to detail as far as like the Indianapolis stuff was very good. Like that he had the actual high school and the actual t-shirt, but maybe that's just me knowing what those things look like.
Then you know what, I'm going to change a little bit. I'm going to say there was a fair to middling amount of attention to detail in this movie.
That's fine.
And I feel like one of the places where their attention to detail really kind of fell down was around cancer.
Yeah.
So, a couple things.
Yes.
In the course of the movie, they go to a support group.
Yeah.
Which in the book, doesn't he refer to it as a crematorium?
Maybe.
I think that's the scene where I just really like that.
Yeah.
And they're surrounded by kids who either have had cancer or currently have cancer.
Yes. And we're given to understand that like oftentimes these are not necessarily people that their cancer is in the past, because oftentimes one of them will pass away and then they will like sort of read their list of names. So they're kids in all range of health. Yeah. Shall we say.
All of the kids are really either currently dealing with cancer or have survived cancer.
Yes. You mean the actual children.
The actual actors in it.
Which is very cool.
Which is really, really good. I'm really glad they did that. And it really sounds like they develop relationships with a lot of them over the course of the movie. And I just think that's really, really... I think it's great.
Yeah.
I think it shows a really good attention to detail. And then there's another scene in the movie when Augustus is at home hooked up to an IV with a big sticker on it that says chemotherapy.
And it's pink.
And it's pink liquid. I did a little research into this.
Into chemotherapy?
So you said, what did you say about that?
I said I'm concerned that they think chemotherapy is the name of a specific drug.
Right. And also, you seemed very adamant that you do not get chemotherapy at home.
Well, I said I didn't know.
Okay. I found out a little bit.
Okay.
I did a little research.
Yeah.
It was very depressing. And basically... some chemotherapy is obviously given in the form of capsules and pills.
Yeah.
When it is an IV, I didn't see any evidence that people get IV drips at home.
Yes.
Unless they actually have a nurse come to the house.
Right.
But I did see that people get pumps. So you actually
get like an infusion pump.
You can get an infusion pump. So it's like a 24-hour dose.
Yeah.
And you actually wear it on you.
Yep.
That's not what this is.
Right. It's an IV pull.
Yeah.
Like I assume that like a chemo pump would be more similar to like my insulin pump.
A little bigger than that. They look pretty big.
But it's not like you're not like wheeling it around on a like on an IV pole.
Yeah.
I would assume.
And I could not find anything about this. I would love to hear from anybody. This is our question.
Yeah.
Does an IV bag used to give someone chemotherapy drugs,
which there are many different drugs.
Does it say on a big sticker on the bag in big letters, chemotherapy?
Yeah, because it looked like one of those pharmacy labels that will say like, do not drink, like more like a warning label, like that say like, do not drink alcohol, while that you see like on a bottle of pills, like
right.
well, take with food or whatever. This just said chemotherapy, and it's just like a 2-second like full shot of just this IV bag.
Which, here's the deal, as a device to get people to understand that he is now on chemotherapy because he's not doing very well.
It's great.
It works very well.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where like on first viewing, maybe you don't notice it, but then on repeat viewings, you go, man, that bag just says chemotherapy,
I noticed
does it?
And we had to go, and you were like, wait, they did what? And we had to go back because you actually hadn't even noticed it.
So, but that kind of speaks to, I think that level of attention to detail, which I think was kind of lacking, speaks to what you were saying before about how she's treated over the course of the movie.
Yeah.
Where she's she's sick when it's convenient for the plot.
Right. And so is he sick when it's convenient for the plot. Because
Yeah.
one of the sort of my very last note that I have is that, so we talked a little bit about, so she's very sick. He gives her his they don't call it this, but his Make-A-Wish wish to go to Amsterdam. That's how they get to go. And there's a point at which she thinks she's not going to be able to go because she gets very, very sick.
Yeah.
But they arrange it so she can go. He finds out before they go that he's had a recurrence. He went for a PET scan and like he's very sick. He is made
as he refers to
he
it,
is
his
made of
body,
cancer.
his body is now made of cancer.
Yeah. And he goes anyway. And he doesn't tell her until they get back or until they're on their way back.
No, it's
he tells her there.
Yeah, he tells her there.
But at the end of their trip.
And you also find out that like her parents knew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The point is he doesn't tell her before.
Right.
But the way that it's referenced in the book is there's quite a bit of foreshadowing as to her sort of kind of getting the sense that something's wrong. They go to his house to pick him up to take him to the airport, and they hear him and his mom yelling at each other in the house, and he's screaming something like, because it's my life and I'm going to do it the way I want, or something like
it's
that.
my body.
It's my body. It's my life. And I like in the way it's described is like her mom takes her by the shoulders and turns her around and walks back to the car, and she's like, no, wait, I want to listen. Her mom is like, we cannot eavesdrop.
Yeah.
And then when they're in Amsterdam, there's a couple of moments where like she notices that he's like in pain or he's limping or like something's hurting him. And then he tells her, what's going on with him. In the movie, it really just comes out of nowhere. We have other than our thoughts as human beings who have seen movies before that know something terrible is going to happen.
Because it always does.
It always does. But there's really nothing to foreshadow that that's what's happening. And for me, what I wrote down is like, it's not subtle. It's just like literally like they're sitting on a bench and he's like, well, I have bad news. I have cancer. My cancer's back. And it's actually really well acted scene.
Oh, they're really good in that scene.
The two of them on the bench. And I don't mean to take anything away from how good that scene is, but just in terms of...
I was talking before about how like most of the tears in the movie are not real tears.
Yeah.
The tears in that scene are real tears.
Totally real tears.
Yeah.
From both of them.
They both do a great job.
But like just in terms of movie making, like for me, like the foreshadowing in a cancer movie is what lifts it up from like a Lifetime original movie. And what the hitting you over the head with it and these sudden revelations and you seem fine, but actually you're being eaten away by cancer. Like that's more like melodrama to me. And I wish that they had left in those sort of subtle things to let us know, like, foreshadowing is a time-honored literary device, and like, let's use it. It's great.
Well, foreshadowing works well. Let's talk for a second about figuring things out.
Yeah.
So there's two examples that I can think of figuring things out.
Yeah.
First of all, as an audience reading the book, you kind of figure out that something's wrong.
Yeah.
You really do. And so when he says it opens up this whole world of, did she know? Did she have suspicions?
Was she just kind of trying to deny it to herself?
And all of which is very interesting. And it really kind of brings the book alive. It makes the characters feel very alive.
Yeah.
Because life isn't very cut and dry. And sometimes you wonder, like, did I know the whole time? So I think that in terms of figuring things out, that's an example of a place where the book really lets you figure this out as an audience member, but the movie doesn't.
Yeah.
The movie just says, we're just going to present you with this information.
Yeah.
But then there's another example of it in terms of the characters figuring stuff out. And it has to do with Hazel at the end.
Right.
Would you like to talk about this?
Sure. So we haven't talked a lot about Peter Van Houten.
We don't need to.
Because he's a monster.
He's just an asshole.
Suffice it to say that there's a very good example in the book of why you should never meet your heroes, because the book and the movie, because she goes to Amsterdam basically at his request or at his invitation, what she thinks is his invitation. She meets him and his assistant, who's wonderful. And his assistant is basically like, I invited you because he's very sick and not physically, but
he's an alcoholic.
He's not doing well, and I wanted him to see that his work had an effect on real people, and clearly it didn't work. He says horrible things to her. He says, you are just the result of people pitying you. Like we as adults shouldn't indulge you sick children. Like you want everything to be done for you, and you're not worth our time as adults to keep you alive.
By the way, what's the book about?
What's his book about?
What's his book about?
Oh, it's about a child. It's about his daughter.
It's about a girl
with cancer.
With cancer.
Which, yeah, we mentioned that a little bit before.
Which is one of the reasons why Hazel loves it so much, because she identifies with it.
Yes.
So anyway, he is very negative on how people treat children who have cancer.
He's terrible. And she's just saying to him, but I just want to find out what happens. I just want to find out what happens after the book ends. And he won't tell her because he's like, nothing happens after the book ends. So she says fuck you, and they leave, which is great. It's the one F-bomb they get in the movie.
They get one. It's PG-13.
Yeah.
Yep.
But we find out later that Augustus has actually continued to correspond with him, and that he had written, so Augustus asks her and Isaac to write him eulogies, and then we find out that he had written her a eulogy and sent it to Peter Van Houten. And she only kind of just realizes that there was something that he had written, and she doesn't know what it is, and she doesn't know where it is.
Can I interrupt for one second?
Yeah.
But one of the other things, just super quick before we get to that, going back to the fact that the book within a book is about a girl who has cancer.
Right.
Right. One of
The
the things that she figures out, what happens after Augustus dies, is that Peter Van Houten shows up at the funeral.
Yeah.
And this is how she finds out that they were corresponding.
And she's like, get out.
And they have two conversations. In the movie, they just have one conversation, but in the book, they have two. And one of the things she figures out over the course of their conversation is, oh, you had a daughter.
Yeah.
And she died. And that's why you wrote the book.
Yeah. And
that's where that came from.
Yeah. And she literally just says, he's like going on, and she just says to him, like, how old was your daughter? Like, she just knows.
She figures it out.
Yeah.
In the movie, she is not given the opportunity to figure it out.
Yeah.
He presents this information to her.
Right.
The filmmakers have him present this information. What does he say? Something like she was 8 when she died, or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
But she's not, as a character, she's not given the actual...
She's not given the tools that she needs to do the thing, and it just makes her seem less smart, but she's not given the information that she gets in the book to allow her to figure it out.
Right. And then the other way that happens is what you were talking about in terms of the eulogy.
Yeah. Essentially, through a series of events, she figures out that there must have been a piece of writing, and she's looking for it in his house. She doesn't know what it is, but she's looking for it in his house, and his dad calls and says, I found a notebook, but there's pages torn out of it, but there's nothing else in it. And then she writes to Peter Van Houten's assistant, whose name I cannot spell or pronounce.
I think it's Ludovic.
I just call her LV in my notes. And she ends up finding it and sending it back to Hazel.
But she really does some sleuthing.
Yeah.
Like she says, it must be here. It must be
she
here.
She looks at the hospital.
Yeah.
She looks at she goes to the church and looks at the church. Like she tries to find it. She doesn't. The thing that I've said this now a couple times, but the thing that I think is really interesting is she doesn't know what it is. She just has these clues that there is a piece of writing somewhere that she needs to find.
Right. And in the movie, Peter Van Houten comes to the funeral and gets in her car and is talking to her, and he tries to hand her a letter.
Yeah, she
takes it and crumples it up and throws it down in the car, and she tells him off, and he leaves. And then the movie continues, and then at the very, very end, their friend Isaac says to her, but don't you know about the letter he wrote? He sent it to Peter Van Houten. And she's like, the car.
Yeah.
And then runs out and reads it, and it's his eulogy to her.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. And it's really, really good.
And I like that the book and the movie both end with that.
Right.
They both end in the same place.
But she didn't get to figure that out.
Right.
It was just given to her.
Right.
So it just, I don't know. I think Hazel is an incredibly strong main character. I don't think she's allowed to be as great a character in the movie as she is in the book.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because of a bunch of things like that, where she's not allowed to figure these things out. These things are just presented to her.
Yeah.
In the same way that the audience isn't really given the ability to figure things out. These things are just presented to us.
There it is.
And that's... I honestly think this is probably... I think this is a good movie that we just have a lot of problems with.
Yeah.
I have problems too in terms of how it's shot. This was crazy to me. It's shot by a guy named Ben Richardson who shot Beasts of the Southern Wild.
Oh.
Which is
a very
very beautiful movie.
Yeah.
And this is not. It's a very, very I found very, very little that was interesting about the way this movie was shot.
It's kind of generically shot. Like I said, the shots in Amsterdam look like they should be a commercial for the like Amsterdam Board of Tourism.
Yeah.
There's just some like they're beautiful shots of Amsterdam, but they're very generic shots of Amsterdam.
Yeah, and there's like a couple of montages throughout the movie. There's one where she's waiting for Augustus to call her, and the shots keep like walking towards her, zooming up on her phone, and then going up to her face, and those are interesting. There are occasionally very interesting things in the movie in terms of the way it's constructed as a film, but the majority of it is just kind of there.
Yeah.
It's just there. So I feel like this is a good time to do a couple of different segments. So we've already done...
The female character's a little underwritten.
Let's talk about Sir not appearing in this film.
Go for it.
I don't know if you have a nominee for this.
Let me hear yours, because I have one in mind.
Okay, so my nominee for Sir not appearing in this film is Sir William Shakespeare, who does not appear in this movie at all.
Okay.
And this is important to me. Can you tell me about the title of this book?
Yes. The title in this book is The Fault in Our Stars.
Where does that come from?
It comes from a play by Shakespeare, Julius Caesar.
And who says that?
Cassius says it to Brutus. He says, "The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves that we are underlings." Don't interrupt me when I'm quoting Shakespeare.
And that is our relationship. But it's a very good line.
Yes.
And it informs so much of the story.
Yes.
And it's in the book.
Yes.
It is absolutely in the book.
Yes. It means nothing is fated. If our lives aren't as we want them to be, it's because we are imperfect.
Right. And I think that thematically, it's really good for that to be there.
Yep.
It also makes sense because if you're going to name your book The Fault in Our Stars,
You should explain why.
you should explain where that comes from.
And it is in the book.
It is in the book.
Not in the movie.
It absolutely is in the book. But it's not in the movie.
No.
At all.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah, no.
And I just wonder, I certainly don't have this idea in my head that no one going to see this movie doesn't know that that's where the line comes from. But I certainly don't think everybody does.
No, I wouldn't have thought so.
And I think it's really unfortunate that they didn't think that that was something that was important. I don't want to be the person that gets really hung up and saying like, well, they left this out and they left this out and they left this out.
Except for the fact that that is kind of the point of this particular segment.
Yeah, exactly.
What they left out.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
And here we are.
Here we are.
And here is The Fault in Our Stars.
Yes.
Why is it even called that? And I think it's important, and I think they left it out. What do you think?
Well, I agree with you. I have a different nominee.
Who's your nominee?
My nominee is Augustus Waters' ex-dead girlfriend.
Oh, yeah.
So in the book, Augustus has an ex-girlfriend
who died after they broke up.
Who died...
Like
no.
They didn't date. They dated before she died.
They dated before she died, but they didn't break up.
I was trying to say that he wasn't dating a dead girl.
Right. They were together and she died.
Right.
And her name I think was Caroline.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Hazel feels a little bit insecure about is how do you compete? She goes on Caroline's Facebook wall and she sees all of the people leaving comments about how wonderful she was and how she fought so hard and how she was so perfect. And she sees these pictures of her and she's beautiful. And like, she just feels like she can't compete with the memory of this perfect dead girl. And when she finally talks to Augustus about it, he basically explains to her that she had this terrible aggressive form of brain cancer that made her a jerk. Like, it wasn't her fault, but she treated him terribly. Like, she would call him horrible names and she would laugh at him and she would laugh at the fact that he was an amputee and make fun of him. And like, you can't be mad at someone who's doing that for reasons that it's not their fault and they can't help it, but it's certainly painful to experience. And I think Augustus, having gone through that experience, makes him a deeper and more interesting character. And also, like, he's battle scarred too. Like, she's saying to him, I don't want to die and hurt you. And he's saying, especially because you've already been through that with another girlfriend. And he's saying, I know exactly what it's like. You don't have to worry about it. Like, I know what I'm in for.
Yeah.
And I think it just makes him a deeper character that he's had that experience in his life. So I think she's an important character, and she is not in the film at all.
That is also true.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the end of Sir not appearing in this film.
There it is.
2 very good nominees, I would say.
Yeah.
And so let's wrap this up.
Yeah.
So in general, how'd you feel about this movie?
I was and am disappointed in the way that they translated this book that I like very much into a movie. On the other hand, I think it could have been significantly worse. Like, I really think, like, because we know that John Green was very heavily involved.
Yeah.
And
is in the scene in the movie.
And is in
that got cut for the theatrical version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I want to go on the record and say he was very good in that scene.
He was fine.
And
so I think that speaks to John Green's involvement, that it is quite true to the book, but like there are just a lot of subtleties. The plot is well represented. Mm-hmm. It's not like, they're not like ridiculously beautiful. They're not 30 if they're a day. Like, they seem like teenagers who are having a real experience, which I think is hard to depict.
Mm-hmm. And the movie depicts it really well.
Yeah, I don't want to be unfair to the movie. I don't want to come down on the movie too hard. I think there were a lot of subtleties that the movie didn't catch.
Yeah, this movie is fine.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine as a movie.
It could have been great.
Yeah.
And it's not bad.
Yeah.
By any stretch.
Yeah.
It's not poor. It's not bad. It's fine.
Yeah. So I think on our chart.
Yeah. Let's look at the quadrants on that.
I think on our quadrants, I think it's gonna fall into. I think it's on the cared about it side.
Definitely. I really think everybody cared about it.
But I think it falls below the good line for me. But not too far below.
I think it falls right on the good line.
Right on the good line.
Right on the good line.
Yeah.
It's 50-50 on that.
Okay. Not far below it.
No.
No. But yeah, I think it's sort of in that Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy
the reach
territory where they loved it.
Yeah.
They felt strongly about it. They wanted to do it. They were committed to the source material, but just fell a little bit short.
I don't think they had the resources they needed.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear, when I say resources, I don't mean money.
Yeah.
I think it really comes down to time.
Yeah.
In terms of, which I guess time is money when it comes to movie making, but in terms of rehearsal.
Yeah.
It felt like everything was new the day they were on set.
I would be interested to know what it would have been like had John Green been the screenwriter.
Yeah, I wonder.
Because there were these sort of, like, John Green, I think, gets inside a teenage girl's head really well,
mm-hmm.
and I'm not totally sold on how the screenwriters did that job. Maybe a female screenwriter would have been great too.
Yeah. There's a lot of dudes who made this movie.
Yeah.
Whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
But there we are.
Yeah.
So we did the cancer movie.
We did the cancer movie.
Yeah.
And we got through it.
Yeah. We did really, really well.
Yeah. So.
Any final thoughts?
No. I think we covered everything. I know this is a really popular book, so like if this is a book that you love, if you feel differently about the movie, or the same, I suppose, we would love to hear from you. Do you want to let people know how they can get in touch?
Yeah, as always, we are easy to get in touch with in many different places. You can find us online at adapterparishcast.com. You can get in touch with us at adapterparishcast@gmail.com. We're on Twitter and Instagram at AdaptCast. I think Instagram is probably the better place to get in touch with us right now.
Yeah. The Instagram seems to be taking off a little bit better.
A little bit better.
Yeah.
Follow us on there.
Yeah.
And we want to hear your comments. We want to hear your concerns. I have a feeling this is one of those episodes that could make people angry.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We'll
see what
I
happens.
actually genuinely don't know how people feel about this movie.
Yeah.
I know how I feel about it.
But you know what? I think the Penny Guy did a good job.
Good job, Penny Guy.
Good job, Penny Guy. All right, everybody, have a good one.
See you next time.
Bye.